The Loud House looks like one of the most harmless shows on Nickelodeon. Lincoln is just a normal kid trying to survive in a house with 10 sisters. His parents are constantly dealing with chaos, and almost every episode ends with another ridiculous family problem being solved. But the more you look at the details hidden throughout the series, the stranger the Loud family starts to become. Behind the jokes, the colorful characters, and the constant noise, there are stories about loneliness, family secrets, missing memories, and things that don't seem to make sense. Some of these theories come from details that fans have noticed in the actual show, while others have grown into darker fan interpretations of what might really be happening inside the Loud House. Today, we're looking at 10 of the darkest secrets surrounding the Loud House, and by the end, you may never look at Lincoln's family the same way again. Number 10. Why does Lincoln always seem so alone? The entire premise of the Loud House is that Lincoln is surrounded by people all the time. He has 10 sisters, 2 parents, a huge house, and more family members than most kids could ever imagine. Yet one of the strangest things about the show is how often Lincoln behaves like someone who has absolutely nobody to talk to. Even when the house is full, he frequently escapes to his room, hides in the bathroom, or searches for somewhere quiet where he can finally be alone. On the surface, this is just a joke about having too many siblings. But there is a much darker interpretation that fans have developed over the years. Lincoln is the only boy among all of his siblings, and because of that, he often feels like an outsider inside his own family. His sisters have their own interests, their own friendships, and their own relationships with each other, while Lincoln frequently becomes the person who has to adapt to everyone else's world. The darker theory is that Lincoln's constant attempts to get privacy aren't really about wanting peace and quiet. They're about wanting to feel important to somebody. He is surrounded by 10 sisters, but that doesn't necessarily mean he feels understood by any of them. The reason this theory works so well is that the show's comedy constantly hides the emotional reality of his situation. Every time Lincoln gets ignored, interrupted, or pushed aside, the audience is encouraged to laugh and move on. But if you remove the comedy, you're left with a kid who spends a surprising amount of time trying to convince his own family that he matters. Number 9. The family photos don't always make sense. One of the easiest things to overlook in the Loud House is the number of photographs, drawings, and family pictures that appear throughout the house. They are normally just background decoration, but fans have noticed that the family history presented through these images can sometimes feel strangely inconsistent. The Loud family is supposed to have a relatively normal history, yet the characters occasionally appear in pictures where their ages and appearances don't seem to line up with the timeline of the series. That has created a darker theory that the family history shown to the audience may not be completely reliable. According to the theory, the Loud children aren't necessarily being shown in chronological order because the family itself has changed over time. One version of the theory suggests that some of the children may have been born much earlier than the show implies, while another suggests that certain photographs represent memories rather than actual events. The strangest interpretation claims that the Loud family has deliberately hidden parts of its past from Lincoln because he is too young to understand what happened. Of course, there is a much simpler explanation. Animated shows aren't always perfectly consistent with their own timelines. Writers change details, characters are redesigned, and background art is often created without anyone expecting viewers to analyze it, frame by frame. But that's exactly why these little inconsistencies are so useful for darker theories. When a show leaves a tiny, unexplained detail in the background, fans can turn it into an entire mystery, and the Loud House has enough family photographs to create plenty of them. Number 8. Why is Lincoln always the one who gets blamed? There is another pattern that becomes much more noticeable once you start paying attention. Whenever something goes wrong inside the Loud House, Lincoln frequently ends up being blamed, even when his intentions were good. Sometimes his sisters misunderstand him, sometimes his plans backfire, and sometimes the entire family becomes angry at him before they even know what actually happened. In a normal sitcom, this is simply part of the comedy, because somebody needs to be the character who creates the conflict. But the darker interpretation is that Lincoln has gradually become the family's scapegoat. Imagine growing up in a family where 10 different personalities are constantly competing for attention. Each sister has her own problems, and each one expects the rest of the family to accommodate her. Lincoln often becomes the easiest person to blame because he is right in the middle of all of them. He isn't the oldest, he isn't the youngest, and he isn't the most dramatic. That makes him the perfect target whenever the family needs someone responsible for a disaster. The theory becomes especially uncomfortable when you consider how often Lincoln tries to fix problems that he didn't create. He spends enormous amounts of time planning ways to make everyone happy, only for those plans to collapse and leave him looking responsible. The show treats this as a running joke, but there is a darker psychological reading. Lincoln may have learned that keeping everyone else happy is more important than taking care of himself. Instead of asking what he wants, he constantly asks what everybody else needs. That could explain why so many of his stories revolve around trying to control situations that are completely beyond his control. Number 7. Lucy may know more than she says. Lucy Loud is probably the easiest member of the family to connect to a dark theory, because her personality is deliberately strange. She spends most of her time talking about death, ghosts, cemeteries, and supernatural subjects. And while the show presents this as goth comedy, there are moments where Lucy seems far more aware of things happening around her than everyone else. The theory is that Lucy isn't simply interested in death. She may actually believe that she can communicate with the dead. Her obsession with ghosts could be interpreted as more than just a personality trait, especially because she frequently appears to know things before anyone tells her. In the darker version of the theory, Lucy has experienced something in the past that convinced her the supernatural world is real, but the rest of her family simply assumes that she is being dramatic. There is also something interesting about the way Lucy behaves when everyone else is panicking. While her sisters usually react emotionally to strange situations, Lucy often remains calm. She treats frightening subjects as though they're completely normal. A harmless explanation is that this is simply how her character is written. But a darker interpretation suggests that Lucy has already accepted something about the world that the rest of the Loud family hasn't discovered yet. If the show ever decided to take Lucy's personality seriously, she could easily become the character who knows the biggest secret in the entire family. The fact that she constantly jokes about death makes it almost impossible to tell where the jokes end and the truth begins. Number 6. The Loud House may be hiding a forgotten sibling. One of the darkest fan theories surrounding the series involves a hypothetical 11th Loud child. The family already has 10 daughters and one son, so the idea sounds impossible at first, but fans have used inconsistencies in family photos, background details, and jokes about the children's past to create a much darker interpretation. According to this theory, there was once another child in the family who disappeared before the events of the series. The family never talks about the child because the subject is considered too painful, and Lincoln may not even remember that the sibling existed. This would explain why certain older family photographs could theoretically contain an unexplained extra figure, or why certain rooms in the house sometimes feel larger than they should. The most disturbing version of the theory claims that Lincoln's parents deliberately removed all evidence of the missing child from the house. They changed photographs, packed away toys, and stopped using the child's name. Lincoln, being the youngest at the time, eventually forgot everything. The reason nobody tells him the truth is because the family believes that remembering would only reopen an old wound. There is no official evidence that such a sibling exists, and the theory is entirely speculative, but it fits the kind of mystery that works perfectly in a cartoon universe. The Loud House is full of family photographs and personal belongings, so the idea that one missing piece of that history could be hidden somewhere in the background is exactly the kind of thing that keeps fans searching. Number 5. What if the Loud House isn't as big as it looks? The Loud family has 11 people living under one roof, which immediately raises a simple question. How does everyone actually fit inside that house? The series has shown bedrooms, bathrooms, hallways, living spaces, an attic, and numerous other rooms, but the layout often changes depending on the episode. Doors lead to different places, rooms appear larger than they should be, and the house sometimes seems capable of containing far more space than its exterior would suggest. Normally, this is just cartoon logic. But the darker theory suggests that the Loud House is deliberately impossible because the house itself is hiding something. According to this interpretation, certain parts of the building may not exist in the normal layout at all. There could be rooms that the family rarely enters because they contain objects from their past. Imagine if the reason the children have so many different stories about the house is because each one experiences a slightly different version of it. One sister might remember a hallway that another has never seen. Lincoln might discover a locked room that his parents insist doesn't exist. An attic could contain boxes belonging to people the family no longer talks about. This theory becomes particularly creepy because the house is essentially another character in the series. It contains the family's memories, arguments, secrets, and childhoods. If there were something the Loud family wanted to hide, the house would be the perfect place to hide it. Number 4. Lincoln's white hair may have a darker explanation. Lincoln's white hair is one of the most recognizable features of his design, and the show treats it as nothing more than a visual joke. But fans have created a much darker explanation for why he looks so different from the rest of his family. Why does a normal-looking child have completely white hair, while almost everyone around him has a different color? The obvious answer is genetics, or simply the artistic style of the character. But the darker theory suggests that Lincoln's appearance is connected to something that happened before the series began. According to one version, his white hair appeared after an extremely stressful event when he was very young. Another version claims that Lincoln was born with a condition that his parents never explained to the other children.